My name is Sven Efftinge. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Gitpod. And today I'm talking about how we aim to free developers from the friction of managing local dev environments. According to a survey from 2013, software engineers spend around 9 hours per week on things like waiting for builds, tests, and massaging their dev environment. So that was back in 2013. I'm not sure about you, but I've been involved with, development and in various different projects since then, and I have seen it only got worse. We are working on polyglot projects with many different programming languages. We have microservice systems, larger systems. Oftentimes you're not even able to run your stuff local on your machine, but still we do, right? So this is for sure a problem. And the mainstream software engineering doesn't have a solution to that. Like there have been some approaches here and there to automate things, but what the mainstream does so far is really making only fun of that. Like we have XKCD comic strips about that, or Dilbert or so, but really we don't have a solution. This is really 2021 is today, and with this, having your local dev environment still being kind of the single stateful thing that needs to serve all your different projects you're working on. That's the same thing everyone did in 1980, actually, with engineering. It's just the same way we do it. And this is a big hurdle, it's intimidating all the new engineers, all engineers who try to start on your project. So when I I have an idea, I want to provide some value to your project. What I have to do is I go to Git and, clone Git, whatever you are using, GitHub or GitLab. I clone the Git repo locally and check it out, check the right branch out and so on. And then I need to, look, hopefully you have some documentation telling me, these are the tools you want to install. You have to install. Like this is the database we use, and this is maybe application server in that version. And we use that compiler and so on. So I have to prepare my local machine. Hopefully, it doesn't conflict with other things I've set up for other projects. This documentation also usually doesn't work, actually. I mean, it's outdated, or it doesn't cover my operating system or my version of my operating system. So there are these, a lot of problems with this, usually. Then, of course, I have to download some sort of editor or IDE and make sure I have proper configuration for the project. And then I have, usually what I have done is set up everything, and so I can actually run the build. And that is required before I can start coding. I need to execute the build, because that is basically inflating the source code. So when you use you have the source code in Git, but you don't check in derived resources like generated code or the actual database contents and so on. So you have to prepare all that before you can run the application, and you do that. You run npm install or maven install and so on, and then you wait for it to download the internet, but also run the build, run code generators and so on. And then eventually, if everything worked fine, you are able to start coding. And yeah, this is by no means a really nice onboarding feeling. And actually, a lot of these steps you have to do continuously. When you are working on the same project, you still have to, git fetch, switch branches, rerun the build, download the libraries again, because there might have been changes and so on when you do a code review for a colleague and so on. And so it's not only hard and time consuming to get this set up, but it's also a source for errors. You can make a lot of mistakes here. And the documentation that tells you what to do is probably also full of bugs and problems. And as a result, you end up with works on my machine situations, or often it doesn't work on your machine really, but it's somewhat only. And it's also known as configuration drift, because also you do that once at some point in time, and then you keep working on that project. And over time, of course, the configuration might change, but not everyone has seen that, and you are still massaging this stateful mess that you have locally on your machine, and you don't really know how you ended up there. You just poked around over time, and it somehow works, but it's not reliable. You don't know how you get there, and so probably you also cannot help new users and so on. So it is a huge source for frustration and a sink for energy, like draining energy and motivation and so on. So definitely worth, eliminating. And it's funny because the software engineering world is all about automation, and we are super good with automating, our DevOps pipelines. We have, the CI builds, and we have preview environments, and we are automating deploying to staging, deploying to production, and this whole pipeline is absolutely automated. But when it comes to development, where we actually do the value creation, we go local and do a lot of things manually, and I think we need to stop that. So how can we stop this? How can we make sure I have an idea and I can, just code directly and do the creative stuff only? We can embrace what we've learned from DevOps or CI/CD and so on. We can describe our dev environments as code instead of prose in a README. So then when we've written it down formally, we need a system that is able to understand this formal description so it can provision me a dev environment when I need one. And because this provisioning takes a lot of time, I want to have a system that prepares these dev environments ahead of time. So whenever there are changes, that means the dev environment would change. And usually, for instance, every change in source code has this effect because it might change the outcome of code generators, the outcome of builds, and so on. So you prepare these dev environments basically whenever there is a new Git commit. And the idea is really, continuous integration or CI/CD applied to dev environments. And with that, we are able to automate all these frictionful, error-prone parts that we discuss, and most of developers do manually today on their machines. Let me show you the system we've built, which is Gitpod.io, in action that solves this problem like that. So you see here a Git repository. It is a Spring Pet Clinic. It's an example project, the very popular Spring Pet Clinic. And I'm looking at one issue here, and I want to solve that. So pretend I want to, allow it that you don't have to specify your first name. So that's what the issue is about. You see this button here. So this button, this Gitpod button, exists because I have installed the Gitpod browser extension. The only thing this button does is really prefixing the URL with Gitpod.io hash. So you don't have to have the browser extension. You can just go off now to any GitHub project, and they're in any kind of context like issues, pull requests, or whatnot, and write Gitpod.io hash before the URL. And that will spin up a dev environment for this particular context. So here, we are looking at an issue. So Gitpod understands, you probably want to solve that issue. So let me give you a dev environment that is based on the default branch. And then I will create a local branch already for you, named after the issue. So you see here, down below here, the branch is called make first name optional, right? And you see the IDE starts up. It is VS Code. That's the default browser interface for Gitpod workspaces. And we already see the dev environment, like the application under development here. So this is a web app that has already started. And if you know Java, you probably wonder why was that so fast. So if I scroll up a bit here, you see there's this comment between the two tasks. So it says, hey, you just saved 3 minutes. So this is what I mentioned earlier. The dev environment was prepared ahead of time. So, Gitpod knows there's probably at some point someone who wants to start a dev environment on this project. So it prepared a dev environment already. And so I don't have to wait for this build. And it's actually cool because now multiple people can start from this dev environment, and we executed the build only once and it not on every dev environment. So I saved this, and then after that, it just starts a web server. So I can see here now the application. I can just use it. It runs in the cloud, so there is a container running in the cloud. I have access. I have terminals. I can here start another terminal, and you see it's just just a standard Linux thing. And you see here the checked out repository, and I can now go off and open the class person Java, where I know. Oh, so this was already fixed. Too bad. So I can now say, hey, no, I don't want this to be optional. I want to make it mandatory again. So then this property first name is mandatory. And you see here, this is the ports view actually. So I just close the preview environment. You can also open it just in a new tab, right? If you want to do. And yeah, I can mess around, do changes, and then when I'm done, I go to the Git view here and make first name mandatory and create a commit. And now I can push this branch. I can also see it here from here. I can create a pull request and then, create the pull request. It asks me whether I want to push the branch first. Yes, I want to do that. I publish the branch. And now you see here, this is the PR, the preview, and I can click here and see this is the PR I just created with that simple change here. So, and now I'm done with this work, and I just close the browser tab with the dev environment. I don't need to take care anymore because I pushed all my changes, and Gitpod will now take care of the cleanup. So it will now stop the container and then move the workspace into this inactive list of workspaces and clean it up. There is a garbage collection that just removes dev environments after 2 weeks, and then you don't have to care. And so if I want to create do a code review, I just can do that. So here's another PR, and again can click the button, and I get a dev environment that sits on that branch, and I can do a code review. I could do that in parallel. I can have multiple workspaces in parallel. Also, when I sometimes you code on something and you hit a bug in a library or so, in an upstream library, you can just open a dev environment on that library and tinker around, maybe fix it or just debug it, go into dev there, and then when you're done, you close the dev environment. So here, this is the now I created a dev environment on this pull request, so it opens this pull request. I can also open it here and you see all the comments. And I can make here contribute to the comment. Well, this is me talking to myself. Doesn't matter. And of course, I can do code review from here and so on. And again, when I'm done, I just close the tab, and I don't have to take care of any cleanup or so. I want to show you the some more parts of the app. So here, this is a list of workspaces that are currently active. So you see, I'm stopping. This one is currently stopping. This is still running. I could open it. I can, of course, delete it or share it or pin it. If you look at all workspaces, you see, so this is my history. You see, I've started lots of workspaces I no longer care about, so they are filtered out. I can also start workspaces from here. So this is a list of recently started workspaces. I don't always have to go to GitHub or GitLab. But the point with Gitpod is also, we want you to get the dev environment where you need them. So you see some code somewhere on the web, and you should be able to just, okay, I want to go deeper. I need a dev environment for this, and then click a button and start coding. All right, so let's go back to some more slides. The first thing I want to mention here is I need to move this maybe to the bottom left. The different properties of these dev environments, these Gitpod dev environments. Of course, the obvious one is these dev environments are automated. So you use dev environment as code, which also means this code is versioned, which is really important. For instance, if you want to go back to an older version and you need to maintain that, probably some of you have done that in the past. Going to some old version that you have still to have to maintain and fix a bug there. That's never fun. But it is especially not fun if you don't know how to set up a dev environment for this state anymore, because it's so it's so outdated, so different, and it's just messy, and it also messes up your current local machine and so on. With Gitpod, this part is no problem. You just go to that branch or that version or that commit, click Gitpod, and it will pick up the Gitpod YAML from that date. And also, it means that dev environments are reproducible. So they work the same, or they don't work at all, for every colleague on in every occasion, which is super nice because you don't have these works on my machine situations anymore. So you see, maybe can also tell from the imagery on the left, a lot of the automation, like the description of dev environments, is based on Docker. We use Docker images. Of course, you can run shell scripts within the dev environments, and that runs after the git checkout and the git clone on the source code. But at the heart, there's a lot of use of Docker. So if you have automated them, you can treat them as ephemeral, right? You can just continuously apply the automation by always creating a fresh dev environment, which is super important. If you have this automation that is only good for onboarding, then this automation only gets executed when there is a new colleague starting with a project, which means, a couple of times a year at most. That is really not enough in order to have enough buy-in into this automation, in order to keep it maintained, updated, keep it working. Also with, starting fresh dev environments all the time, it means you can always start fresh. So, which is good because you are you are on a blank slate, like, you haven't messed up the state previously. And when something goes wrong, it is because of the current changes and not some changes you did 2 weeks ago. And then you cannot see this, but it says you can work in parallel, which is actually interesting. I mean, I would say mentally we are probably not really great at working in parallel, but what this really means is you work on a feature and then you do some coding and so on, and eventually maybe there is a task that you want to execute some long-running tests or something like that. So there is this situation where you could do something else on the side. And then there's your colleague who asks you for a code review on the same project. Well, you don't want to mess up your current situation, your current feature work and so on. You don't want to stash and whatnot. And so with ephemeral dev environments, no problem. You just start a new dev environment and do the code reviews there. And you don't mess around with the one where you are developing a feature. So in order to be able to, really use ephemeral dev environments, like starting fresh ones, starting a fresh one needs to be cheap. It needs to, you don't want to invest anything. You don't want to have any kind of, I need to set up this and that, or even waiting. This is really important. And this is why we invented Prebuilds. So let me explain what that is. The typical services that do dev environment automation, there are some others like GitHub code spaces, for instance. What they do is, you go to your project and you want to start coding and you say, hey, give me a new dev environment. And then they create a virtual machine and then they pull the Docker images, run Docker inside and clone the repo and so on. It takes a lot of time. And then you end up there with the raw, fresh checkout. And then you have to manually run a build and wait additional time. Like, this example was 50 minutes, quite concrete. We did that with the VS Code repository, the open source repository. So it takes around 50 minutes to get into the state where you can actually, you have executed the build. With Gitpod, you get all of this in less than 1 minute. And this is because, Gitpod pre-builds everything on the last commit, on the previous commit, where you start the dev environment. And so you don't have to wait. And therefore, you don't have to invest into this dev environment. You don't, spend time waiting for it. And therefore, it's no problem to throw it away after you've done your task, being it as minimal, as kind of, I want to just look up a certain file. So that's what I personally do a lot. I don't really like the search and navigate functionality on GitHub or GitLab directly. So I open a dev environment in order to, have deeper search and navigation. So I do that with Gitpod, no problem. So that's also why you see, in the terminals, these nice messages that you've saved time. So this is what it means. The pre-build time is what you've saved. You don't have to wait for this. What you've also seen in my demo is contextual dev environments. I mentioned you can go to any GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket project, and also therein you can go to issues, to merge requests, pull requests, branches, and whatnot, and do the thing you want to do. So if you want to fix a bug, you go to the issue that describes the bug, open a dev environment, and you see what you just saw in the demo. You get a branch, and you can create a pull request or a merge request. You can do a code review, going to a merge request or pull request, open a dev environment, and then it opens up on that branch, of course, but also, putting the actual pull request in context. So you see it visually, you can comment on that and so on. And there are other contexts like, files, branches, commits, etc. It's really like, the dev environment is not only prepared, but also opens using the contextual information. So furthermore, dev environments need to be more accessible, specifically, in these times where you work from different places remotely. Sometimes you go maybe to an office still, and then you have your machine there, but oftentimes you do working from home, or some prefer working from a cafe or so. So you need to be able to access a dev environment from maybe different devices, or also devices that are not so powerful. And with a solution like Gitpod, you can do this. They are container powered, and then you have a web-based interface. So you can use an iPad, you can use a Chromebook, you can use your overpowered MacBook Pro for sure. And it still works great. But this is really the point, you don't have to, you are not stuck to this single machine and carry that around in order to be able to code. And of course, something that is maybe also obvious here is you don't copy all the source code to your local machine anymore. You have a very secure window into, a cloud-based dev environment where the code sits, which makes it much, much easier security-wise, to protect the source code. It is not, there are no physical copies on your hard drive anymore. And finally, these kind of dev environments are also good for collaboration. And with Gitpod, there are two ways to collaborate here. Mainly, like in addition to the typical great collaboration through Git and GitLab, GitHub, you can live share a workspace. So, you open a workspace and you say, oh, I have a situation here I don't understand, and you're calling a colleague, maybe you have a video conference or somewhat, you're telling them, and they, yeah, can I have a look? And you share the URL of the workspace, and they can go into their workspace and run code there, open editors, and so on. And so this is obviously quite nice, but what's even cooler, and that's also more, I think, a better way of collaborative working is to use asynchronous communication, where, and so Gitpod really embraces that by providing snapshots. You can you can snapshot your dev environment. So you have a situation where you've opened some editors and some changes, and then you figure, oh, there is a bug, and I think I have a situation here where I can reproduce it. What you do is you just say, give me a snapshot. You get a link, and then you share that link. You can put it into an issue. You can even put it on Stack Overflow if you want. Because people who click this link don't end up in your workspace, but in their own exact copy of that situation. And so this is even long living. Like in half a year, people can still, open that snapshot and get a copy of that exact situation. Of course, this feature, as you can imagine, is also great for, tutorials and interviews and so on. All right. Yeah, the last point is about a MyDev environment. So what does that mean? I talked about team configuration, team level or project level configuration. Software engineering typically is a team sport, and what what I hope, my whole presentation got across is that it is really important to version a lot of the configuration that is the same for everyone in the team in the repository. So streamline that, so there are no surprises, it's reproducible and so on. That's all great. But then there is personal taste, and we work every day in these dev environments, and we do that for a living. We are professionals, so we want to feel comfortable. We want to make them our own, and I think that's really important. And so what we do in Gitpod is we layer a user level configuration on top of the project, the shared project configuration. So you can put in your own extensions on top. You can have your own themes and colors, and generally, settings, configuration, key bindings, and so on. And so this is super important. I think it's worth to share, if you have consent within the team, you should always aim to sharing it and versioning it in Git. But for something like themes and certain extensions, this is very personal, and you don't want to be forced to, put that into project configuration. Also, you don't want to miss out on that because you're spending many hours a week in this dev environments, and they need to be just perfect for you. All right. So with that, I'm at the end of this presentation, and I hope you understand also that what kind of big problem we are trying to solve here, and I'm super excited about that. We at Gitpod, we have been using this solution for 2.5 years. I think 3 years ago is when we started the project, and after half a year, it was already in a state where we could dog food it ourselves. And of course, in the beginning, it was sometimes, I think it was still pretty much better than the local mess up, because Gitpod is a Kubernetes application, and then with Minikube and all that stuff locally, that was really no fun. But so we are happily, now for the last 2 years at least, I don't even know how to set up Gitpod locally, and I don't have to. I mean, there are some Terraform scripts and Helm charts and so on I could probably execute, but I'm really, I don't want to do that on a daily basis. I just want to get into, I see something, or I want to fix some issues or so, and be able to, just focus on that and iteratively improve the project and the product. And so if you are interested in this kind of workflow, you should just go to gitpod.io, try it out. There's a very generous freemium tier. Also, Gitpod is open source, so you can see all the source code on github.com, gitpod.io. And also we are, of course, super happy about any kind of contributions, feedback, and so on. Just check everything out. The links are there. Thanks.